Hello, everyone. This is Dorie Clark with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better, where we talk to diversity leaders and executives about how to create a more diverse and inclusive workforce. Our guest this week is Octavia Goredema. She is the author of the book. We got it for you here. Okay, I'm gonna even cue it up. Prep, Push, Pivot, and essential career strategies for underrepresented women. Octavia, it's so great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Dorie. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Okay. Firstly, and most importantly, because I am American, we do not know about these things, but should I be calling you Dame Octavia? How does this work?
Oh, that's so sweet of you to ask, but no, Octavia's just fine. And so, yes, if anyone's confused watching us, I received a title from the Queen. Yes.
That's amazing. So, I mean, all right, we're going to talk about diversity, but first let's talk about the Queen a little bit. Did you get to meet the Queen?
Now, on the day of my investiture ceremony, she wasn't feeling well. So Prince Charles, who's now King Charles, was the person who gave me my honor.
Oh, well, that's very exciting. And how does that actually even happen? Again, like when you're an American, this is all sort of like mind-boggling and things you read about in children's fairy tales. So like, how does one get invested by the Queen slash Prince Charles?
Oh my goodness.
Does somebody nominate you? How does this work?
Yes, exactly. So twice a year, the monarch recognizes civilians for exemplary work, and I was nominated for the work that I do. I was doing a lot of work connecting Black women in particular in business and doing work in schools and providing access to role models. And unknown to me, I was nominated. I had absolutely no idea. I also didn't get the letter advising me that I was going to be recognized because I'd moved from London to Los Angeles for the second time and didn't get the letter. So what I actually got was a phone call from the cabinet office to let me know from 10 Downing Street.
Well, that's awfully exciting. Congratulations. That is a cool honor, which I guess is not going to be coming my way anytime soon as an American. So I could just be like, whoa, super impressed. So, all right, let's talk a little bit more about this work. So you wrote a book, Prep, Push, Pivot, and it's specifically for underrepresented women of color. So you're obviously in it sharing a lot of elements that are traditional career guide. Here's what you need to know. What are the biggest differences? I mean, obviously there's a lot of nuance. You wrote an entire book about it, but in writing a book and thinking about it, specifically for women of color, what are the key things that they need to know and to be aware of that are different as compared to the rest of the world?
Yeah. So there's so much that we do see, Dorie. I mean, we know that women of color remain the most underrepresented group in the corporate pipeline. And we know that the intersection of gender and race decimates our earning potential. When we look at what white men and then what women of color earn on the dollar, it's just staggering. But then there's so much that is invisible to others. There's so much that so many of us, we all have a moment that happens at some point in our career where we're like, wait a minute, did that just happen to me? Or wait, was I not included in that? Or did that person just actually say that out loud? And for all of us, that first moment is so jarring. And, I'm a Black woman. I'm now a dual US, UK citizen. I started my career 23 years ago in London, moved here to Los Angeles. I was always raised that I'd have to work twice as hard, whether that was in school, whether that was finding my first opportunity, whether that was building my career. That was a given, but there comes a point where working twice as hard only gets you so far. And what makes me really afraid is that there's a point we hit where there's just this exhaustion, whether it's from the microaggressions or maybe outright discrimination, or just from not making it as far as you want to go, where so many of us are like, what do I do now? How do I navigate this? Now, I'm a career coach, but not everyone has the opportunity to work one-on-one with a coach, Dorie. So I really wanted to create a resource that someone could use at whatever moment they're facing in their career to have some kind of action-oriented perspectives on how they can navigate their next step.
That makes a lot of sense. That's great, Octavia. So I'm actually also curious. So much of the discussion in the United States about diversity and inclusion is about the U.S. context, and which like a lot of countries. I mean, it's very particular, right? We have the legacy of slavery and things like that. But I'm curious, as someone who's coming from the UK, do you feel like, I mean, you live in the United States now, at least partly, but do you feel like you actually approach diversity issues differently, or that you see race differently? Or, is there kind of like a little bit of a disjunct, like, oh, why is everyone talking about it this way? Because, obviously you grew up in a different frame, in a different context.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that are pervasive from the United Kingdom and also to here. And I live and work here. I'm a US citizen. This is my home now, but I did start my career in the UK. And those were the formative years. So many of the challenges that I personally faced replicated themselves regardless of exactly where I was located. But there is different nuances. I'm also an immigrant, and there's also a very important component. No one person's experience is going to be the same as anyone else's. My experience as a Black woman and coming to America isn't going to be the same as someone else doing that exact same thing either. There's a multifaceted conversation that needs to be had, but some of the consistent and systemic trends are definitely the same. And, it's so hard. And, I have the benefit of having a really rich and vibrant network. I know people who are doing phenomenal things on both sides of the Atlantic and beyond that. But to see and hear some consistent frustrations and experiences from women that I know doing phenomenal things in different markets, in different industries, was a lot of the impetus for me to write this book.
Interesting. Thank you. So one of the big questions, I mean, this is something that is talked about in all corners over the past several years, since the advent of the pandemic. But remote work and hybrid work is kind of an interesting new variable. And there was a study that recently came out. It was a joint Harvard Federal Reserve Bank of New York study. And it was showing that, ironically, as these things so often go, the people who are most likely to want and embrace remote work are often younger workers. They're often women. They're often people of color. But those are often the people who are most disadvantaged in the end by doing remote and hybrid work, because they have less visibility in the office. People kind of, forget about you when you're not around, and they're less likely to get the kind of mentorship and tutorials that can help people really advance. So what do you make about that? I mean, as you think about strategies for women of color in the workplace post-pandemic, you might have somebody who like really digs remote work. Are you advising them like, no, don't do it, go back into the office? Or how do you thread that needle?
Yeah, I found that study really fascinating as well, because at the exact time when it dropped, I was coaching someone who's having that exact conversation with me and worrying about the fact that she was not in the office was going to impede her advancement. And here's the thing: when you're an underrepresented professional, your connections and the advocates for you are pivotal to your advancement. Now, whether you're cultivating those relationships in person or whether you're being intentional about maintaining your visibility and scheduling time with people and communicating what you want to do next, and tracking your accomplishments and sharing your work, we have to be ready to take that next extra step to maintain our visibility. And I do worry, Dorie, about people who are at the start of their careers, people who are trying to find their way, because I know so much of figuring out, especially when you're one of the onlys, perhaps on a team or in an organization, is really by observing the dynamics of what's going on around you. Who interacts with who, how they do it, who knows who, the spaces perhaps you need to be in, what is recognized. And there's a lot of nuance that goes into those relationships. And if you don't have built-in networks already that can help you, or if you're new to a company or an organization and you're trying to just figure out not only your job, but who everybody is, I think it's an important consideration. And there's no easy answers to that.
Yeah, Octavia, thank you. This is Dorie Clark. We're here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. And our guest this week is Octavia Goredema. She's an author. You can learn more about her and her work at her website, octaviagoredema.com. Her book is Prep, Peter Piper picked a peck. Yes, it is prep, push, pivot, essential career strategies for underrepresented women. We're so glad to have you here. And speaking of pivoting, I want to pivot, Octavia, for a moment to your nominee for Better Leader of the Week, because that is one of the features that we do. We have our interview subjects nominate someone that they know or have worked with, or they're, whose work they admire, as the Better Leader of the Week. And that's somebody who is exemplifying some of the principles of diversity and inclusion. And your nominee is Cecilia Velasco Wadi, who's the Associate Director of DEI at a company called Kyndryl. Can you talk a little bit more about Cece and why you nominated her?
Oh, yes. So I nominated Cecilia because I am just blown away by her engagement and enthusiasm and just advocacy for so many of her peers at Kyndryl. Kyndryl has inclusion networks, and there's so many companies who they want to do the right thing. They want to provide resources to advance the professional development of their employees, but they're not ready to take it to that next level. They might invite someone like me to come in and be a speaker, in Women's History Month, and then that's it. You're done. You get as many people, in the room as possible, and then you move on. What Cecilia does is she spearheads programs that last for a whole year, that are open to women across the organization, and that allow them to come together and learn from one another and receive coaching and support and strategies to really advance their careers. And I think that is so powerful. It's been such a pleasure to support that work and also to just witness that commitment ongoing. There's so much of that work that isn't necessarily visible, and so much that it takes from someone who also has other responsibilities at the same time, but to pour that into programs that can benefit so many, and the ripple effects of that, because those participants can in turn also be advocates for people in their teams. I just think it's really powerful.
I love that. Thank you very much for your nomination, and Cecilia, congratulations on being the Better Leader of the Week. And so, Octavia, I want to go back to a point you were making earlier. Talking about some of the challenges that underrepresented women face in the workforce. Obviously, there are some issues that an individual does not have control over. If you're the only person like you or one of the few, you can't magically fix that overnight. There's kind of bigger societal issues. But in terms of things that an individual person can do, that they can take control over in their professional life, what are the top things that you recommend? What's your top piece or pieces of advice that individual women of color in the workforce should keep in mind?
Yes. Don't feel like you have to go it alone. Even if you feel that maybe you don't have a mentor right now that you can talk to, or perhaps an advocate for you at your organization, be really intentional about looking at what support you need and finding avenues to connect with others who might be able to support you. When I was writing my book, I heard Kamala Harris make this statement about breaking barriers. And, we celebrate so many underrepresented women in particular who, make it, whether it's to the Supreme Court or the corner office or whatever it is. And in your own journey, it might be, once you land that promotion and you get that title. But what we don't often see is what happens after that. And what Kamala was saying is, we celebrate breaking barriers. But what people forget is that breaking barriers means something is broken, and it means often something hurts. And I see that as a coach. I coach individuals who you look at their LinkedIn profiles or you read their bios and they're doing fantastic things. But what we don't see is what it takes to do that. Building our careers is the most personal and the most valuable investment you will ever make, ever. And so it's not just where you're going and what you're striving towards, but look at the support that you need to get there. And if there are gaps, seek out peers, talk to others, invest in your professional development before someone's ready to invest in you. Do all the things that you need to do to set yourself up for success.
That's terrific. Thank you very much. Again, this is Dorie Clark. We're here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better. If you want to learn more, subscribe to the email list so you can get updates. Go to dorieclark.com. You can download a free self-assessment and join the email list. And if you want to learn more about our guests today, her name is Octavia Goredema. You can check her out at her website. Her book is Prep, Push, Pivot. Now, Octavia, one of the topics that you also cover in your book is something that that many women, I mean, many people certainly, but especially perhaps many women face, which is taking time off for caregiving responsibilities, whether it is maternity leave or caregiving or something like that, and then re-entering the workforce and how to navigate that. And there may, potentially be different nuances related to women of color with that. Can you talk a little bit about people who have taken career breaks and how your advice for them as they work to re-enter and sort of get back into the swing of the corporate world?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to broaden that out because yes, it's an important, of course, topic for women. The United States lags behind almost every industrialized, nation when it comes to parental leave, but it's not just a conversation for women. The AARP says that 1 in 5 adults in the United States will have to care for another person at some point in a given year, whether that's, a newborn, whether that's a parent, whether that's, someone having a sudden accident. And oh my goodness, when you've taken time away and you're trying to come back, I know from experience just how hard that is. When I re-entered the workforce with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, I have to be honest, I felt like I was failing every single day. I was failing someone. I was either not able to do what I perceived to be everything that was needed at work. I was not able to fully get my arms around or even begin to get my arms around everything that needed to be done before I even started my workday and everything that needed to be done at the end of my workday. And what I am a real advocate for is let's normalize conversations about what it takes to make this work. Let's normalize people sharing what it took for them to be a caregiver for their parent, while they made that ascent to becoming, a C-suite officer, or being a manager for the first time, or whatever position that you're in. I felt when I was navigating that, I didn't dare talk about what I was trying to juggle because it would be a weakness. And that's wrong. I do hope, Dorie, that perhaps the immense weight of everything that we've navigated post the pandemic might help make that shift in terms of people having to really recognize that there's so much that goes into not just being at work, but in terms of our health and our families and support and what we need. But we need to normalize those conversations, and we need to make sure that when people are returning to work for whatever circumstances or trying to stay in their jobs while handling their caregiving responsibilities, that they're given access to people who have managed to do it in their organization, people who have perspectives on it, people who can help them troubleshoot, perhaps help them identify how to set themselves up for success. And the circumstance that you're in as a caregiver isn't necessarily one that will remain forever, but that moment in time is so important. So let's do our best as leaders in companies to support our people who are navigating additional responsibilities.
That's terrific. And speaking of doing our best to help others with that, if someone is watching this who wants to be an ally to women of color, maybe they are not themselves, but they would like to be a great manager, a great colleague, what are some of the strategies that you would recommend, or ways that people can step up and get better at doing that?
Yes. So talk to other women about what they want to do next. Be ready to recommend connections, stretch assignments. Talk about where there are gaps and how you can perhaps support gaps. Give permission to fail and try things, because that's how we learn. All of us. We've got to try something, right? We've got to have an attempt. We've got to have a shot. And the thing to remember also, we're not just often so few or maybe the onlys in our organizations, we're also that in our own networks, in our own communities. So having advocates who can be sounding boards for us and guide us and give us stretch assignments and opportunities is just so powerful. It really, really is. And then when you're also perhaps people outside of perhaps your organization and just perhaps in your industry and sector, look at people who are maybe a few years behind where you are. You might not think that you're in the position yet to be a mentor. Oh, yes, you are. There's always going to be someone who's looking at you, even if you don't realize it, and would love to perhaps know a skill that you have, or talk through an experience that you've had, or even just know what you earn, right? All of these things can make such a difference to someone else's career.
Such great advice. Thank you so much. We have been here with Octavia Goredema. Her website is right here, octaviagoredema.com. You can check her out and especially check out her book. It's called Prep, Push, Pivot, Essential Career Strategies for Underrepresented Women. Octavia, it's so great to have had the chance to speak with you. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dorie.
Thank you. And we will see you next week with Better.